Hello, my name is Lord Enochium, and I'm from the band Casm, and we're going to be mixing and mastering one of my songs called When Is the End of Summer off of the album When Is the End of Summer. Links to my bands and links to the mixing and mastering profile that I use on Fiverr are in the description box. So this is my project in Reaper. Let's go ahead and take a listen to the song just to get a gist on kind of what we're working with. Okay, that was a sample of the song. And we're going to be starting with rhythm guitars first off. And for rhythm guitars, I process both left and right. For lead guitars also, and solo guitars, I process both left and right equally. So there'll be no real changes to left and right, respectively. Here I start with rhythm guitar one, or rhythm guitar left. And I use NLS channel and LNS bus on this entire mix, actually. So, um, I keep the drive fairly low just to give it a little bit of noise, a little bit of that saturation from the console, but just enough to make the noise kind of shine through the mixes, not necessarily make it overloaded with heat. Um, so for all channels, for the guitars, I use SSL channel or SSL style plugins, and I make some cuts from the high pass and low pass filter, um, around 8K down to maybe about 6K, for the highs, and up to about 128 to 228 hertz for the lows, as far as the pass filters. I then again boost some of the highs, just at a particular peak, in the highs around 5 to 6K. Um, and I boost the mids and I boost the lows to give it more of a percussive bitey type sound. So that's the way I like my guitars, is more bitey. Um, with this project, it's more of like a traditional black metal project. So I like to have the guitars kind of lo-fi sounding, but not too much. And with the compression, here I'm using the CLA 3A. Just boosting it just to give it more of a level as far as channel volume wise goes. I eventually route it to a bus where I do most of the processing for the volume. And I also use on all guitars, drums and bass, just about the Pro Q3 or Pro Q4, one of the two. And this one I'm using the Pro Q3, and I make some EQ moves you can check here. These are the settings. I took out some of the mids in this just to give it a more ducking type feel. I could use a multi-band EQ if I want to, but I like to do it per the channel in this project. So I boost the mids, but then I duck it or at least notch it at certain parts where I feel the mid shouldn't be there. And these are the settings again. Again, I do this for both left and right channels for almost all guitars that have both left and right guitar channels recorded. For the rhythm bus, I use the SSL mini channel, I call it, but it's like basically like the SSL channel, but with fewer bands and more of a more subtle cue. And I use that to just kind of round off the bus, um, and then back that up with some compression here in a second. These are the settings for that SSL channel for the bus, rhythm bus. And here I use a native bus compressor. It's a stereo bus compressor, and I keep the settings on it um, pretty simple, not too much. I either boost the compression or cut the compression depending on, at least for the rhythm guitars, depending on how I feel the guitar should stick out. And I guess in this one, I boosted it about 4.2 decibels. So I guess for this project, I was boosting guitars more so than keep them hidden or around near the drums or bass. Also, too, I sidechain every guitar um, to a ducking delay, and it's usually either a classic delay or a tape delay, and I have it sidechained onto a compressor to duck the delay before it hits the reverb, because there's reverb on uh, on the ducking delay channel, but I put it after the side chain, and I want I did this on purpose because I want the delay to hit the reverb, but then kind of like hit the reverb like a brick wall, where it ducks the delay and then the delay hits the reverb after instead of having both the reverb and the delay ducking at the same time, which would cause it to like drift or maybe have a higher threshold of gain, which makes the delay and reverb kind of buck and causes this big wall of reverb sound after the sidechain is over. I usually use that technique on some of my other projects where I have vocals. I have vocals on this project, but it's not in the session. But on what I usually do for vocals is I um, sidechain and duck both the delay and the reverb, so when the vocals are over it hits the reverb and it causes this kind of like cacophony kind of hallway type sound. And that's why I'm using Valhalla Room for this, because it has a very deep presence in a reverb without taking a lot of headroom and without using a lot of CPU resources. And I do this for both all of the guitar tracks. um, let's go ahead and take a listen to what it sounds like soloed. Okay, lead guitars. And for lead guitars, I do sometimes every now and then duck the rhythm guitars so that the lead guitars can shine through. Um, I think that I might have done this for this project. Um, duck the rhythm guitars so that the lead guitars can shine through. But on here, for lead guitars and all guitars, like I said at the beginning of this, I use NLS channel to route to an NLS bus. And I'm just using a simple setting, just adding a little bit of drive for some saturation. I also use the SSL style uh, channel plugin coming up here in a second. Now with the lead guitars, I pretty much cut most of the highs down to about maybe like between 6K and 4K. Cut the highs all the way down to there. And then I pass the filter at about between 128 hertz and 228 hertz to give the rhythm guitars a little bit more room to breathe. And then what I usually do is keep the settings about the same for everything else, the highs, the high mids, the low mids, and the lows, boosting them to give the lead guitar more percussive sound, but I usually sidechain those to make them kind of uh, over top of the rhythm guitars, and over top of the bass guitars. And these are the settings. I also use CLA on the lead guitars and the solo guitars. Um, Pretty simple settings. I don't do anything like wizardry or any type of mastery things. I'm more of a beginner intermediate type of mixing and mastering type of person. Um I wouldn't say I'm bad, but I would say that there's room to grow. And I learn every day by going on YouTube, which is a very good resource to find mixing and mastering tips and learning how to do different things. With it, especially with EQ and compression and general overall leveling and balancing. Um, it's a very good resource, and I suggest it to people who want to get into this sort of thing too. Um, Again, Pro Q3, and I'm using these settings. Again, on the lead guitar bus, I'm using simple settings for the native bus compressor, um, more of a SSL style bus compressor. Um, Using simple settings just to give it a little bit of boost. If I really want to add, like overall leveling or gain to any of my guitar tracks, I usually do what people do to the drums, which is I parallel compress them and I automate it according to where I feel the parallel compression should be in the mix. Um, I know that's a technique not really used for guitars, but I use it from time to time just because it's easier than having to automate each and every individual track to have um, more or less compression. Again, ducking the delay into the reverb um, after the side chain. The reverb is after the side chain here on the lead guitars and solo guitars. And these are the settings for the compressor, which are about the same for the rhythm guitars. I know I didn't mention it earlier, but the settings are about the same. I usually leave the attack and release at default. Um, if I do change the attack and release, I usually put the attack at about 33 to 45 and the release at about anywhere from 275 to 500. Um, and I also cut off the side chain at about 128 hertz and about 1300 hertz. 13 to 1400 hertz, just to give it a little bit of room, but not really um, sidechain all the mud. And these are the settings for the lead guitar reverb. I use Valhalla Room for that. So those are the settings for the lead guitar, rhythm and lead guitar thus far. But for the lead guitar, we're gonna go ahead and listen to it both soloed with and without the main track, soloing just the reverb, so you can hear what the reverb sounds like, just the reverb by itself. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Solo guitars. And solo guitars to me are, in my opinion, when I go to mix things, the more easier thing to think about because I usually just cut the lows and I create space by adding a side chain over the rhythm guitars and maybe even some of the lead guitars, um, so that the solo kind of shines through the middle of the mix, instead of just being like drowned out by the rhythm guitars and everything else playing, especially the drums. I use NLS channel on this, as well as all channels as I mentioned earlier, the SSL style EQ. Um, by the way, the NLS channel and NLS bus are on the spike setting. I like that better than I like the Neve setting. A lot of people go for the Neve setting, but I like the spike setting. It just works better for me. Um, Again, high passing and low passing very drastically. Um, but adding it back in little by little in individual spots. Um, I think that works better uh, when you can hear it kind of like, um, not too harsh and not too muddy, and then you kind of add everything back in to give it a little bit more body. I like that a little bit better, than just trying to find, with a Q, reverb set on high, gain, where the problem frequency is. Um, Again, I use CLA on the lead guitars. Pretty simple settings, and these are the settings. I also use Pro Q3, and I make some pretty drastic cuts. Um, my lead guitar, or the guitar that I use, is not the best guitar in the stinking world. So, I end up having to cut out a lot of like fret noise and different stuff like that on all the guitars that I use, for a project like this. Just because I play in such a high tuning. Um, for this one, I play in standard E flat, but I been more recently been playing in standard D, which kind of helps. But I don't use any snuggies or anything like that over the guitar headstock to get rid of the fret noise. I just kind of deal with it like a real guitarist does. Um, so these are the settings for the Pro Q3 on the solo guitar channel, and this is a solo guitar bus again with a native bus compressor. Um, on pretty simple settings, and these are the settings here. And we're gonna go ahead and listen to. Oh no, this is before we go ahead and listen to the solo track. Solo. This is the ducking delay, into the reverb again. Um, I think that a lot of people don't do this very often. I would say go ahead and try it. See if you like it. It just makes things sound a little bit more blanketed and a little bit more smoother than um, without the side chain and without putting the delay over the reverb or however it is that you all that are listening and watching do this. And these are the settings for the compressor, which are pretty standard, it's pretty simple settings: -18 and -24, maybe -36 even if I really want to duck it that much. Um, on the threshold, and the attack simple and the release simple, with a external side chain, cut off at 128 hertz to 1300 kilohertz. And this is my settings for Valhalla Room. Um, I pretty much um, put the send on each of these reverb channels at unity and drench it with reverb first, and then tweak the reverb, and then if it's too much reverb on the channel, then I back off the send volume to give it more of a mixed in type of taste. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the solo guitar soloed. And this is the parallel compression channel on the guitars I was talking about earlier. I'll add a little bit of warmth, basically like using heat and Pro Tools. I'll add a little bit of channel warmth, either with NLS bus or something that gives it more of a warm tape type saturation, like a tape simulator or something like that. And then I'll slam it with an EQ. Um, I mean, not an EQ. My apologies, guys. Not an EQ, a compressor. Come on, Michael. A compressor, um, and give it more of a warm type of punch in the face kind of thing. So this is what I usually do for the guitars and maybe even the bass sometimes. And see, I'm using the CLA 76 on the compression bus for the guitars at a 20-to-1 ratio. Pretty much slamming the guitars with a subtle warmth. I like the warmth to be subtle, but the compression to be kind of harsh. And these are the settings for that. Bass guitars played by a real bassist. Um, yes, I'm in a band called Saint Destroyer, and my bassist Throm um, does bass for all my projects wherever I need them, and some other side projects or other projects that he's not directly a part of. He does guest bass guitar for that, and this is his bass guitar playing, which is excellent in my opinion. Um, I start with NLS channel on the same settings for all channels basically throughout this mix, and group it to a guitar bus, or guitar VCA group in NLS bus. Um, I also sidechain it to the kick, um, to duck the bass when the kick comes in. And these are pretty simple settings. I usually keep it around -24 to -30 or -36 on the threshold. Pretty simple attack, pretty simple release, um, pretty high knee, and cutting off at around 100, somewhere between 58 or 88 hertz. Um, Usually, um, if I really want to cut the side chain hard, I'll do it at 100 or 128 hertz, and about 1300 to 1400 kilohertz um, on the highs. And this is the SSL mini channel, as I call it, um, uh, EQ, and I use it on pretty basic settings. Nothing too harsh. Um, I will be including this session possibly if people kind of respond to it, this video well enough. I can probably put the session up on Mediafire or Google Drive and let you guys kind of look at it up close. I know that I'm kind of running through the plugins a little bit fast, and I do apologize for that. Um, and this is the bass guitar reverb. I pretty much had the bass kind of like in a wallow hallway, small room hallway type of reverb sound, using the studio beta setting on Valhalla Room, getting that tight, bass standing in a corner with an amp type of tone, um, and then sending it off to a bass bus. Um, with the native bus compressor, the SSL style bus compressor. Um, Pretty simple settings, nothing too drastic. I think on the bass, I actually cut the makeup gain a bit. It was making probably the bass stick out too far. Um, Sometimes I'll do that um, just to give it a little bit more flavor with the coloring of uh, the compressor, but not so much using it for compression 110%. Um, let's go ahead and listen to a soloed. And that was it for the guitars. And this is drums processing. Um, I have worked with two drummers in Casm thus far. Mortimus, who's in Bloodfelt and Nihilicium, and Frigid Dark Lord, who's the new drummer, who's going to be on the upcoming album. Um, They both record with one or two mics, so I usually get either one or two tracks, which is usually a kick track, and then the rest of the drums on another separate track, like an overhead track or a kit mic track. So there's not multi-track drums really. I just split the one file of drums into three different crossover bands, low, medium, and high. Um, and then I EQ each according to what crossover band I think that they should be at. Starting with the lows, um, putting NLS channel on each individual track, obviously, and then mixing those with different cutoffs at different frequencies to kind of just make a certain part of the drum kit stick out instead of just doing it all in one file. So these are the settings for the low. Um, Like I said, if people respond to this video enough, I'll probably put up the session um, with stems so you can mix it yourself um, and kind of yeah, comment to me the results or send me the results. Um, you could always check out my YouTube um, about section to contact me if you have any questions or concerns, and I'll be more than glad to hear your advice if you have any advice, or hear your concerns definitely. And as you can see, I cut off just some below the mids on the hide so that uh, I can make room for the mid uh, channel. All I did was copy this channel 3 times and put it in 3 different crossover bands, like I said. So this is the mid channel, and I do just about the same thing except I change where the cutoff low is and where the cutoff high is on each individual of the 3 tracks, and then I send them to a sum. I send them to a summer bus before I send them to the main drum bus, and these are the settings for that, the mids. So basically, a lot of people don't believe that it's true cult black metal or whatever people in their basements call it these days. To use a whole lot of like theatrics like EQs and compression and side chains. So mainly for a project like this, I would use the plugins more or less for coloring and making subtle EQ changes, more to make it more of a lo-fi type sound. Um, some of my influences, um, like Within Thy Wounds or like Vials of Wrath or Winder or Sorry from Greece. Um, some of my influences like Zaster, all kind of had that lo-fi but EQ'd, and I stress the fact that those people recorded in a studio. They EQ'd some, uh, but they keep it pretty lo-fi. So uh, I try to do the same thing, but within respects to where I'm working strictly on a digital platform and not so much in a studio on a console board. Um, so this is the SSL channel settings for the highs. Um, I made very, very drastic cuts to ensure that each individual of the 3 tracks was in his own space before I put them in a drum summer and sent them to the drum bus, and also to some parallel compression and some reverb. And these are the settings for that, the highs. Like I said, making very drastic cuts. I think I cut the lows on the highs at about 4600 kilohertz, and cut the highs at about 1300 to 1400 kilohertz, if I believe that correctly, um, just to give it more of its own individual space. I could always glue it back together in with leveling and balancing, and sending it to a sum, and then using a multi-band compressor, not multi-band compressor, a multi-band not a multi-band reverb either, a multi-band EQ, like I have here. Just adding back in like the overall gluing together of the 3 pieces. Um, Keeping it pretty simple, not doing anything tricky. Just keep it pretty simple. All the side chain on the C6 by Waves is um, internal. So let's go ahead and listen to this. The drum soloed and then with the reverb. and parallel compression separately. Again, for the drum bus, I use a native bus compressor. Again, an SSL style bus compressor. Um, as you can see, there's a running theme with this video, in this mix, that I use SSL style plugins. I've found kind of a newfound love for SSL plugins. Um, I think it's what everybody should use if they really want to start to understand the difference of colorings, with different audio plugins and different actual real consoles. So here, this is the parallel compression bus for the drums, and I kept it pretty simple. Um, just using a Kramer Pi plugin, on pretty harsh settings, um, just to make it kind of have that slam, but more of a delicate type of slamming or punch or pumping. Um, very delicate, but using the Kramer Pi by Waves, um, and also using a reverb just for coloring, just there if I need to really clean out the mud. And that was the parallel compression bus. And now we're going to the reverb bus, or the drum reverb or drum room bus. I use pretty ethereal and settings. I use the cathedral setting on this one to make it very dense and very full of reverb. It's supposed to be that way. Um, and so these are the settings for that. Again, having a reverb, not a reverb, but an EQ there, if I need to clean out any mud, of the reverb, um, not being used for anything in this project. And that was the drum processing. And pretty simple. I'm not the best. And I'm sure I made a few mistakes that people will point out to me in the comments. But yeah, this is my mix so far. And I think it came out pretty well. When I put it on record, um, I like the way that it sounded. I thought, I looked back and I said I still make a few changes every now and then, um, but overall I'm very happy with the way the mix turned out, and the way the album turned out, which is out on Vision of God Records, um, Christian Metal Underground Records, a subsidiary of Vision of God. Um, if you want a copy, you can go to the links in the description, and find a link to the Bandcamp of the label website, and the Bandcamp of my band Casm, as well as some other helpful links to some of my other bands. You're more than welcome to leave a comment, purchase anything, send me an email, anything like that. And this is the Masterbus processing. Um, Pretty simple. I split the mid and the side into its own separate tracks, um, basically for monitoring. Um, So I split the mid side with a mid side de encoder. Um, and just use it to where if I really need to hear the guitars, just particularly just the guitars in the stereo spectrum, I can just listen to the sides. And make sure also too all instruments are being divvied out respectively. Making sure no drums or any bass or anything like that. If any of the tracks are mono or leaking into the sides. Um, I'll use for the master bus, the actual master bus. I use parallel compression, just a simple kind of like a parallel mixed with a bus compression, I guess you would call it. Just mixing in some heat um, of the entire mix from the mid inside divvy chain. Just giving it some warmth, some heat, like I said, like heat um, from uh, Pro Tools, just giving it some console saturation. Um, and mixing that into the actual uh, clean mix bus with very little to no processing. Cleaning up some mud that I found in applying some of the quote unquote heat to the uh, the warmth. And usually people use a tape saturation plugin here, and I do usually, but I want to try something different. So um, I use like a heat plugin that just adds kind of like warm saturation, not harsh saturation. And that's the mix heat um, by itself. And then also too, I like to make the entire mix have its own reverb mixed in to give it an overall ambience and presence. I learned this from Chernobyl Audio, Scott from Chernobyl Studios. Um, he was mixing a song by Obsidian Sun, which is the side project of Asa Ground. Um, and he was talking about how he used mixed reverb. And so I tried it and it came out pretty well. I'm very impressed. Um, these are the settings. I use the post production preset. Um, and pretty much keep it simple. I just increase the wet. Um, and I mess around with the cutoff for the reverb, highs and lows. And I mess around with a little bit of the time that takes the reverb to decay. Um, and these are the settings for that. Let's go ahead and listen. And that was the overall mix reverb. Now for the master bus, the actual master bus, I use the encoder first. Um, and then I think I use NLS bus second. Um, and then, as you'll see, I use Noise Katana, which is a free plugin by Nailix. They make free VSTs. And I use that to make the noise of the NLS bus stop whenever there's silence in the song. Um, I can automate it, but I usually just leave it on a very slim setting so that when uh, the playback is stopped or there's silence in the song. It doesn't actually play noise. There's actual real silence, but it doesn't overtake the uh, the fact that there's going to be music playing. So it doesn't. It's not like a gate. I use a noise suppressors instead um, to kind of tame that NLS bus. Here I'm using the Better Maker master compressor, using the master spreader. Um, preset and just tweaking it a little bit um, just to make it sound more profound. And these are the settings for that. Um, pretty simple, not too much, just maybe tweaking the threshold and the attack and release and hold in the makeup game. Um, keeping it pretty simple. I could have used a different one. I could have used one of the other ones. Um, mainly, I'm switched in between using plugin alliance plugins and Waves plugins. But I decided to use the Better Maker uh, master compressor for this one, I guess. Um, and it came out pretty well. Um, again, just keeping it simple. These are the settings. And then over the entire master chain, I use a limiter and I make it a very slow release. I want the limiter to squash. I keep it on auto release. Um, and then I keep the true peak. I guess it would be true peak to do that. At about negative 3.1, anywhere from negative 1.8 to negative 3.1. And thank you. That's about it. Um, if you want to find anything about my band, links are in the description box. Um, keep it true, keep it black metal, and don't let anybody tell you you can't do what you want to do. Thank you for watching.